is a research done in collaboration with Suleika Bott. And of course, presenting papers is, to some extent, presenting fashion. We all want to be recognized, we all want to be appreciated by those we talk to. And this is, to some extent, it's fashion. We try to be fashionable so that you can join in our arguments. Okay, so I have, as Andreas has told you, I have been publishing on fashion in management. That's not my topic today, even though this would also have been a very interesting discussion. But I left this behind me, and I now discuss or look after fashions in science, in management science. So this was just to show you briefly that in management we have a number of fashions, like lean production, business process re-engineering, and these are the typical curves for fashions. We have a slow beginning, then there is a climax, and then it goes down again. This is when we talk about, this is a typical curve when we talk about fashion. When we talk about fashion in clothes, we have similar curves. Okay, these are some spectacular cases in organization theory of fashion in organization theory. There was the Hawthorne experiments, for example. A reanalysis of the Hawthorne experiments shows that wages were very important for workers. But the trend of the times, the fashion was that friendliness of leadership is the most important factor. So the researchers, to some extent, manipulated their findings to show that friendliness of leadership is the most important factor of productivity with the workers. The psychotechnique was a very mad fashion in Germany, at least. So they developed experiments like that. So if you applied as a driver, a chauffeur for somebody, you had to run this test here. You had to go with a steel needle through these streets here. Whenever you touched a nail, there was a sound. And the more you touched the nails, the less suited you were for the job as a driver. And the people who drove the streetcars, they were tested in this way. They had to run a streetcar, a setup of a streetcar, and there were explosions. And paintings of naked women were carried around to have a link with his presentation yesterday. And whenever they made failures, they failed the test, and they couldn't become a driver of a streetcar. Eventually this died out because it was not so successful. The people selected in this way were not better than those who were selected in different ways. And maybe in 20 years we'll talk about in the same way about assessment centers. They are not so much better than these tests here. And nowadays, a very popular fashion is pay for performance. Everybody is paid for performance. Nowadays, even professors are paid for performance. And there is no real proof that people in the upper levels of the organization paid for performance are performing better than those who are not paid for performance. With regard to professors, one can show that those paid for performance are performing less well than those who are getting a good salary and are more intrinsically motivated. So we have, obviously, we have something like fashion in organization theory. We have fashion in practice, we have also fashion in organization theory. So the upper classes are always copied by the lower classes, and so the upper classes have to change in order to be different again. So we copy those upper classes in theory. That means those who start their career, they try to copy authors who are successful in order to be like them and make a career. And later on, those who are successful, the established researchers, they have to change. They have to become different. And one can also, Simmel again said that fashion gives us a basis for differentiation, which is quite interesting. Esposito, an Italian researcher, she points out that, interestingly, she was a student of Luhmann, so she came from Italy to Luhmann and did her PhD there. And she points out that without fashion, it would be very difficult to be different, which is a paradox, but that's exactly what we are doing. We dress à la façon, as fashion, and by doing that, we just can't copy. We have to copy in a different way than others are copying fashion. So fashion is a basis, it's paradoxical, but it's true. Fashion is a basis for differentiation. The more people are applying a certain fashion, the more popular this fashion is getting, and the more followers it is attracting. How does fashion get into science? When you look at people like Popper or Kuhn, there is no room for fashion in science. The researchers, the scientists are trying to increase truth, to replace false knowledge by true knowledge. And they are just driven by their effort to increase insights into the riddles of the world. However, when you look at the practice in research, you find something like that. Scientists constantly relate their decisions and selections to the expected response of specific members of the community of validators, or to the dictates of the journal. So we look what is successful, and we apply the concepts and theories on which appear successful when we are starting our career as scientists, as researchers. Maybe it's more important to be seductive than true, because nobody knows exactly, as we heard yesterday, what truth in science really is. It's a construct. When we publish, we have to establish a relationship with published work which is published already. So we establish a conversation with other researchers which have published before us. And if we are too different, we are not published. We are not accepted, because it's too new, it's too unknown, it's too difficult to establish a relationship for the reviewers. And the reviewers also have a conflict. They want to make decisions that are accepted by the chief editors and by the scientific community. So one can show that Nobel Prize laureates have not been able to publish their work because they were too different, too new. One can also find positive functions of fashion. Generally, there is Blumer. He is a sociologist. He was a sociologist, and he pointed out positive functions of fashion. So fashion provides orderliness in a potentially anarchic and moving present. So without a fashion in clothes, it would be very difficult for us to decide how to dress. Even if we are against fashion, we are somehow basing our decisions on fashion. And the other people can judge how we are dressed according to their idea of fashion. And so we are more orderly dressed because that's funny, but it's paradoxical again, because we are following fashion. And fashion, also from Blumer, loses the grip of the past. So we can try out new ideas and experiment with them and see how they are adopted by others. So it's a possibility to loosen the grip of the past. Fashion provides a basis for innovation. So a new concept, like the garbage can concept, for example, in theory, provides a basis for new studies and for further development in theory. So one can also see a lot of positive functions. The last point, and this ties in with a discussion I started some time ago, is how do rankings and impact factors, performance evaluations in general, impact on theory. And what is clearly seeable is that it reduces the variance in theory. So a deadening uniformity can be registered when you look at the top journals in our field. It's more and more you have variations of standard articles and breakthrough innovations in the field are getting more rare, which is understandable because it's a risk for the authors, it's a risk for the reviewers, it's a risk for the editors, and human beings shy away from risks. So it's quite understandable that impact factors and rankings reduce innovation in a scientific field.